Here we go, just about sailing May 2018. It's fairly early in May. I wanted to get one out as early as I possibly could. Let's have a review of the rudder stuff, what happened, and then a look at the projects and sort of priorities to get Serenity back in the water and then ready for voyaging. The rudder, let's have a little wrap up. I didn't want to make the previous video too long, and also it's useful to sort of, with all the comments and so on, I just wanted to have a quick sort of, this is going to be very talky, sorry about this. If I was to do it again, very simply, I would make a mould. I would use the old rudder as a plug. I would fair up the leading edge because it was a bit asymmetrical. I would fair up that leading edge and make a mould of it, and then make a brand new rudder, and then pretty much do what I did with the rest of it. But the reason that I did it the way that I did it is it was kind of one of those evolutionary processes, and I quite like that approach where you kind of you try something hoping for a good result. If it goes wrong, you just have to solve the next problem, and that's kind of the way that I did it. But I say, if I was doing it again, I would do a mould. One of the things I probably should have done is when I split it open and saw that this was going to be problematic, is I could have actually then at that stage decided to make a plug out of wood or something based on the aerofoil shape of, it's the NACA 0012, which is the kind of one that's recommended for cruising sailboats. So I could have done it at that stage, but once I got so far down the line, I kind of had to keep going. Best products ever. There's some behind me here, Peel Ply. Wonderful product, and I found lots of different things. So moulding the leading edge, the trailing edge, etc. Excellent product. The expanding epoxy, I really enjoyed using that. It is a professional type product, which is partly why that I did all the tests, because as I discovered, and it's absolutely right, you have to have the mixing and the expanding temperature exactly right, between 18 and 23 degrees C, so there's not a huge amount of leeway on there. You have to whisk it, and then when you pour it, you need to do something with the sieve to get the bubbles out. So very, very stringent. And then it's not going to set at all until you do the post-processing, where you need to heat it up for 6 hours plus at over 40 degrees C. So, if I hadn't have been able to get that hot box working, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But wonderful products. Be aware though that if you are watching this in the USA, you might not be able to get hold of it. I couldn't get hold of the Pro Set, the West System stuff in the UK, which is why I went to the Sycamore. And you might find, I think you can get the West System stuff. It might have different characteristics. So if anybody is going to use a product they haven't used before, I thoroughly recommend doing all those tests. That really, really played off. It paid off looking to see how it expanded as well inside the rudder. I knew that I needed to have a bit for the air to escape, but there still needed to be a bit of pressure build up, hence drilling the single sort of hole, which seemed to work out. I could have probably got away with a slightly smaller hole, but it's useful to understand the characteristics of these things. And very important, because many people in the first video did say this, be careful because the whole thing is going to explode apart. Not with the type of foam that I used. If you're doing it with expanded polyurethane, or if you plan to do that, first of all I'd advise you not to the same way that I did it. You can do it and then skim it down, but if you are going to do it, please video it, because that'll make a great video. Maths, I got my maths wrong on a couple of occasions. I did basic sort of maths. My maths is not too bad, to be quite honest, but a better way of doing it would have been to get some dry sand, get the 2 moulds, fill it up with the dry sand, skim it off the top, and then pour that dry sand into a container and measure the volume, and that would have that would have given you a more accurate thing. Then you could have added 10% onto that, and I probably wouldn't have got the wastage, but it didn't really bother me about the wastage. The foot of the rudder, I didn't cover this in a great deal of detail, because where the rudder goes into this shoe thing, it goes into the bush and then into the shoe, that needs to be absolutely 100% flat, because that's where all the weight goes, and that's where the sort of the friction is. The final smoothing of that off, that's going to actually happen when the rudder is on the boat. And let's do a quick cutaway actually, and I'll show you what it looks like and a bit about what I mean. So a bit that I mentioned a few times because it's quite fiddly, but I didn't go into a lot of detail, is this bit at the bottom, and that's where the stock sticks out, and it actually then goes into, this is the old bush, the one that I'm replacing, and then it's the bit that don't know what you call it, this sort of shoe thing fits onto. Very, very difficult to sand it and get it exactly smooth around here. I had a go with various things. Had one of these sanding blocks that I could kind of put over there and sort of rub it around, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until I get the new ones of these bushes, and I'll sand this all back down to the layer of epoxy, and then I'll get the new one. You can see how gnarly this one is, and I'll either put another layer of, in fact what I'll probably do is put another layer of epoxy or 404 and or in situ, with the rudder in situ, put some sort of abrasive or some sanding medium around there and sort of turn the rudder to get this absolutely flat, and then when I put it in I will probably put some ramonol grease in it or something like that. But again, there's no hurry to do that. This very, very fiddly, but I'm pleased. Again, like most of it worked out better than I thought it would. And we're back. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's going to happen when that gets put back on Serenity. The other thing is, somebody asked me, and I forgot to do this, I was going to do this, about water absorption with the two different types of materials. And I kind of assumed that the water absorption was going to be zero. I mean, I know that some of these foams, and you see rudders which have got lots of water in them, but I have now done a little experiment, and let's have a look at this. So what I've done is I've weighed both of these blocks dry. This is the expanded epoxy foam, that came in at exactly 50 grams, and this is the original concrete, which is about, well, that's 147 grams, so significantly more dense. They're both floating, so you can see they're both lighter than water. I've put them in this small tub, and I'm going to put a lid on so I can push them both underwater, leave them for quite some time, take them out, and then weigh them again and see if they've put on any weight, which will obviously be water ingress. Right then, this is many, many hours later. Oop. Let's just dry these off so we don't get the water from the outside. Epoxy foam one, which was exactly 50 previously. I don't know if you can see that, but that's exactly 50. And the concrete one, which was 147 previously, is exactly 147. So no water ingress on either of them at all. And as I was expecting, there's no water ingress at all. These are closed, well, certainly the expanding epoxy foam I knew was a closed cell system, and they test this in very, very hot water for days on end, and you don't get any water in. I thought there might be some coming into the concrete, but there weren't. I didn't really find a great deal of moisture in there, so that was okay. The other thing that was really important, and this was raised, and sorry I've forgotten who raised it, but have a look at the comments, and is the trailing edge maybe shouldn't really be round. I was very pleased that I did manage to round it, because that can cause sort of fluttering and problems. Let's have a quick, again, a little cutaway and see what I mean by that. So here we go. We're going to need, this is the full graphics package with actual coloured felt pens here. So this is top view of the trailing edge of the rudder, and that's kind of the shape I've made it, which is rounded. When I took it off, it was more like this sort of shape, slightly squared, but with much more rounded corners there. And there's a lot of debate about this because of either drag if you're racing or turbulence otherwise, because as we know, pretty much every boat I've ever sailed, there's always been a slight shake to the rudder, and there has been with Serenity, and I've put that down to the leading edge, which I've said to you that I wasn't particularly happy about because it was kind of off centre a little bit. But there is debate about which of these is better. One of the theories is that having a squared edge is better, because if you have a sort of a rounded edge, what you tend to do is the water will kind of swirl around fairly randomly around here. It doesn't quite know what to do. It can't quite meet properly in the middle, so it might go and oscillate from side to side, probably at different speeds. The idea with the more squared edge is that it kind of comes off, creates a little eddy in here, and the rest of it kind of is perfectly happy. There is a lot of debate about this. Another theory is that you should have, and I know there were some Genos which had a problem with a bit of rudder vibration and wobble, and their answer was to cut 6mm off the edge, because some people say what you actually need is an asymmetric section, so that the water kind of meets at a different time, travels a different path length, and somehow that smooths it out. I've also seen this shape showing that actually this is the optimum shape with a slight curve on here. I've also seen a few forums where people have said they've tried this type of approach and it's got worse, and even one that's tried this and it's got worse. Apparently this distance here is quite critical, with some people saying, well, that should really be kind of 2mm or so. So, you know, the only way of really trying this out is either to do it in practice or actually put it into a sort of hydro tank of some sort. To change this to square would actually, let's change colour, shall we? Let's use red. Would actually be quite simple, because all I've got to do is to get 2 blocks of wood or something, or plastic, something that the with peel ply so the fiberglass would stick to it. Sort of put it like this, obviously tilt it at 90 degrees, and fill it up with an epoxy 404 probably mixture, and magically we've kind of got a square section. If I wanted to go for this, you'd obviously, well, I'll mock it up actually and show you what I'm talking about. Now in principle this is fairly straightforward, and I've just kind of mocked this up. That what you can do is to put a sort of a straight edge on either side. Obviously I'd need to seal up at this end. I'd need to have plastic down here, etc. And then you could just sort of fill in the gap so it was level with a sort of 404 epoxy mix. So that's if you were doing a sort of a straight one. If you were to do it more of an angle, then you could kind of just adjust these and trim them and fiddle about with that. But as long as you've got it set up, and as long as this is all sanded down and so on, I don't see any problem at all with putting a length of 404 and epoxy across that. So based on all that, what am I going to do? Well, basically I'm going to defer my decision. I'm not going to do anything at all at the moment, because this is going to be really easy to fix. Obviously only when the boat's out of the water, but really easy to fix if I needed to. So I did have a walk around the boatyard, and I saw that about most of them were rounded, most of the rudders were rounded, 1 or 2 that were squared off. I don't know, what I'm going to do is take the pragmatic approach, is when Serenity goes back in the water, she'll probably go back in exactly as she is now. If there's a problem, then when she comes out I'll do the square edged approach. If there's not a problem, then it can stay as it is. I'm hoping that the fact that the rudder is now rounder than it was before, there won't be too much of a problem, but we shall see. That will be an interesting one. Anyway, crikey, look, I'm sorry, but the rest of this video is going to be talking and looking at projects as well, so I think we better have a little interlude at this point before we get back onto some stuff. So have an interlude, go make yourself a cup of tea. I thought it'd be useful to have a look at the overall project plan to give you an idea and me an idea of the overall plan of what I'm doing with Serenity. So I've got this kind of, I think if it can't go on a sheet of A4, by the way, it's not worth doing. Or that's quarto in America, isn't it? That sort of size. Anyway, I'll put a copy up here so you can see it. So this is divided into 2. The getting Serenity back into the water things and the voyaging things. and I've divided each of those into two. The must-haves, so the things I must do before she goes back in the water, and the things that would be nice to have, and likewise with voyaging. So the nice to have, they can wait for a bit, they can wait for months, even years in terms of some of the voyaging stuff. That's not too bad. So let's have a quick look at the back in the water must-have. The first one, obviously, rudder. Finish that, except for obviously there's a little bit snagging, a little bits and pieces to do once get back. I put the rudder back onto the actual boat. Windows. That's the next big job. We're going to spend probably another 2 episodes doing that. And by coincidence, as soon as I'd finished doing the rudder, well, let's have a look at this and show you what the coincidence was. Well, this is literally about 2 seconds after finishing the rudder. The video is actually, as I film this, the video is upstairs being rendered, because I edited most of it yesterday, just waiting to do the final part on it. So the video is upstairs being rendered. Knock on the door, and this huge, great big box thing has arrived from Seaglaze. So this is the marine windows, so this will be happening fairly soon. I don't normally do unboxing type videos, but look at this. This is on a great big pallet. This is fantastic. So I'm not going to unbox it now. You're going to have to wait until I do the actual windows, which will probably be the next video, the video after. That might be a 1-part, might be 2-part, don't know. But I'm really, really, really pleased with this. Well, hopefully there's something in there. But excellent, what good timing. One door closes, another one shuts, etc. Or whatever the saying is. Right. So you'll have to wait to see what was actually inside those boxes. Was it empty? Was it a trick? What's going on here? Hatch. I've started to look at the hatch. I've built a little thing to put over the top of the hatch for when I'm doing that. And this is all to do with hull integrity. Check keel. By the way, these things with a little green mark on them, if it's a green mark all the way through, that means I've done it. If it's a little green mark over the first bit, that means I've started doing it. Check keel. I need to get the keel sorted out. The initial look-see by the surveyor was that it's actually all right, but we need to double check that. ST2000, that's an an electric autopilot thing. That's the tiller pilot. I do need one of those because the old one broke, and I need a combination of tiller pilot and the wind vane. Varnish washboards, that's not a big job. Varnish tiller, that's not a big job. New jib sheets, that's just a question of writing a check. New anode, that's not a big job. Anti-foul, that will come after. Actually, anti-foul and redo the bottom of the boat, so that's not a major sort of job. New spray hood, obviously I've started that, and you've seen that presumably in one of the earlier episodes, but I need to finish some stuff that I'm doing on top sides before I can start to drill some holes and get that fully sorted out. Internal grab rails. There is nothing to grab hold of inside Serenity, so I've got one of these for each side, and they're going to go up on the inside of the boat. In terms of the nice to have, now bizarrely I've actually put cooker heater on the nice to have side, because if I don't have that I can always there are temporary solutions that I can use for that. Water tank, I've got the fixtures and fittings, and I've got the actual tank. It's a question of putting them in and doing a little bit of plumbing, so it's not a massive job. Holding tank, you would have probably seen in a previous video that I actually had a look at the holding tank, and I figured out where that's going to go, so that's just a bit of tabbing, a bit of fiberglassing. Revarnish everything. I hate varnishing. I've taken most of the internal boards down, and I've started to sort of play around with what can I get away with. Can I just sand it a little bit? Do I need to scrape everything down? Seacocks, I've got rid of the seacocks I don't want. It's now a question of just replacing the ones that I do want. I'm going to replace them all. I think that's easier. Cockpit table, a new leg it says here, because it's a type of cockpit table that you can get with a leg that goes, anyway, we'll see that when we get to it. New interior lining, that will be done as part of doing the windows actually, so that's kind of part of the same job. Swan neck for mast wires. I want to put one of those swan neck things that the mast cables go through, so that taking the mast off is going to be easier. In case I go through the French canals, which is still an option, or if it just I want to get the mast taken down. It's all very fiddly at the moment, so I want to get that sorted out. In terms of the voyaging must-haves, AIS, rewire, rewiring is going to be a fairly easy job. It's really mainly just tidying it up. and I don't mind electronic stuff, and or particularly electrics is not a big issue for me. Very easy to get to all the wires. I've identified everything. I know what I need to do there. Stern anchor, that's a question of putting it on. Third reef point, just get the sail guide to do that. New rigging, yeah, that's a big one because my rigging is about 10 years old now. Third battery, there is space to put that in, and that will take me up to a total of 330 amp hours. Solar panels, I've kind of figured out where I'm going to do that, and I've had a look around the deck that I will need to get something fabricated for that. I'm probably going to have an arch over the back. Wind generator, may not actually get a wind generator, I'm not 100% sure. Storm anchor, yeah, I'm going to get a Mantis storm anchor that I can have. My Rockner is great, but I do want something a bit bigger than that. Life raft, Go Sun. Oh, anchor locker drain. Now this is an interesting one. I will be interested in comments on that. Serenity doesn't have an anchor locker drain. And that, it perturbs me, but at the same time I don't want to drill holes in the boat, which is what everybody else seems to have. So, and there's no way that it can sort of drain internally into the through the boat and into the bilge. So I'm not sure about that. If anybody's got a Mirage or knows a better way of doing it, yeah, we'll have a look at that. On the nice to have, these are trivial things like cockpit lockers, hot water. I'm not sure if I need hot water or not. Soundproofing, water maker, Perspex washboards that I can replace and have see-through ones. Cooling fans if I get to somewhere nice and hot. V-berth mattress, that's just a comfort thing. Side ladder, I've got so many ladders ways of getting back in the boat, but I quite like a side one. Bimini, I'm not so sure about a Bimini. I think I quite like the Habitent thing that you might have seen on Second Wind Sailing. I'll put a link down to John's channel that you can have a look at that. It seems to be good for both hot and cold type stuff. Sheet storage in combings. I hate it when all the sheets are all over the place. And I might do a little bit of fiberglass moulding for that. And the other one that I forgot to put in here, which is important, is a fridge. So there we go. So it sounds like a lot, but it's really, it's the stuff at the top, and a lot of those are fairly kind of simple. So, mind you, the rudder was supposed to take about 2 hours, and it took about 3 months. So, hey ho, that's sailing for you, isn't it? Well, lots of talking in that one. Plenty of action in the next, probably 2, possibly 3. I'll try and keep it down to 2, which is going to be the Windows replacement. Very, very excited with that one. That's going to be a fairly major job. And I really need some decent weather so that I can do this stuff outside. So fingers crossed for that, but it's looking good for next weekend.